My own mother told me you're old enough to figure it out, and walked away with her new husband thinking she was safe, but he stole everything, and now she cries at my door begging for shelter. Okay, so, where do I even start, I guess, with the house? This stupid 2-story house in Denver, with its peeling paint and overgrown bushes. It's mine now, technically. Always was ours, you know. Mom and me, Linda and Rachel. It sounds so normal. And for a while, it really was. Picture this. Red brick, a big backyard with a swing set that creaks like a rusty hinge now, and this massive oak tree that practically scraped the sky. We'd spend hours up there, just her and me, legs dangling, talking about everything and nothing. The rough bark digging into my back, the leaves whispering secrets above us. It was our place, our sanctuary. Summers were all about catching fireflies. We'd chase them through the humid air, their tiny lights blinking like fallen stars, and carefully collect them in old mayonnaise jars. We'd leave the jars on the porch railing, their soft glow illuminating the night. Remember those cheesy wind chimes everyone had back then? Yeah, we had those. Little silver tubes that clinked together in the breeze. Mom loved that tinkling sound, said it reminded her of the ocean, even though we were miles from the coast. Birthdays were homemade cakes, the kind with slightly lopsided frosting and sprinkles scattered with reckless abandon. We'd wear silly party hats, the kind with elastic chin straps that dug into your skin, and sing Happy Birthday off-key. Christmas was hot cocoa with a mountain of mini marshmallows that would inevitably melt into a sticky, sugary mess. We'd fight over who got to put the star on top of the tree, even when I was too tall to really care anymore. It was good, real, like something out of a movie, you know? The kind of childhood you think everyone has. The kind you cling to when everything else falls apart. The smell of Mom's perfume still lingers in the hallway sometimes. Vanilla and something flowery, I can't quite place it. It's faint, like a ghost of a memory. But it always catches me off guard. Makes my chest ache in a way I can't explain. The living room, with its worn floral sofa and faded rug, still echoes with the sound of her laughter. I can almost see her curled up on the couch, a mug of tea in her hands, her eyes crinkling at the corners as she smiled. Then he showed up, Richard, tall, with this slicked back hair and a smile that never quite reached his eyes. And at first, honestly, it was exciting. Mom was happy, giddy even, like a teenager with her first crush. She'd actually blush, this rosy pink creeping up her neck. It was kind of cute, honestly. He was fine, I guess, successful. Ran his own business, something vague about import-export. He always wore expensive suits and drove a shiny black car. He brought her flowers, huge bouquets of lilies and roses that filled the house with their heavy fragrance. He took us to fancy restaurants, places with white tablecloths and waiters who spoke in hushed tones. I remember feeling awkward, fumbling with the silverware, not quite sure which fork to use. It felt like this upgrade, like our lives were suddenly getting shinier, more polished, like we were stepping into a different world, one where everything was perfect and effortless. God, I was so naive. I remember thinking, maybe this is good. Maybe Mom deserves this, after everything being Dad leaving when I was 5, a gaping hole in our lives that Richard seemed determined to fill. I should have known better. I should have seen the warning signs, the subtle shifts in her gaze, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes anymore. But I was too caught up in the novelty of it all, too blinded by the illusion of happiness he created. It started slowly, like a creeping vine wrapping itself around our lives, squeezing the joy out of everything. Mom became distant, preoccupied. Her phone would buzz constantly, and she'd disappear into the other room to talk, her voice low and hushed. Dinner conversations dwindled, replaced by awkward silences and forced smiles. The fireflies remained unchased, their tiny lights blinking unnoticed in the summer twilight. The wind chimes hung silent, their music lost in the growing tension. She started working late more often, or so she said. "Big project at work, honey." She'd tell me, her voice tight, her eyes avoiding mine. I'd nod, pretending to believe her, even though my gut twisted with a feeling I couldn't quite name. It was like she was slowly fading away, becoming a ghost in her own home. The scent of her perfume, once a comforting presence, became a fleeting reminder of what we'd lost. The laughter that used to fill the living room was replaced by the quiet hum of the television, a constant, dull ache in the background. Remember those birthdays? The lopsided cakes and off-key singing? Yeah, those stopped. My 16th birthday? A gift card and a hurried, "Happy birthday," before she rushed out the door, a cloud of that flowery perfume lingering in her wake. Dinner with Richard's client, sweetie. Rain check? The rain check never came. Christmas became a perfunctory exchange of gifts, the tree decorated with a detached efficiency, the hot cocoa lukewarm and forgotten. The star remained in its box, a symbol of the joy that had vanished. Even the swing set in the backyard, our sanctuary, became a rusting monument to a time that felt like a distant dream. She stopped asking about school, about my friends, about the things that used to matter. It was like I was slowly becoming invisible, fading into the background of her new, shiny life. One weekend we were supposed to go to the mountains, a tradition since I was little. We'd hike through the aspen groves, their leaves shimmering gold in the autumn sun, and have a picnic by the rushing stream. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. The Friday before, she came home late, her face pale and drawn. "Richard needs me to go to Aspen with him this weekend," she said, her voice flat. "Business trip. So sorry, honey." Aspen. Not the mountains we knew, the ones with the whispering pines and the crisp mountain air. Aspen, with its glitzy boutiques and five-star hotels. I remember the way my stomach dropped, the cold, hard knot forming in my chest. "Oh," was all I could manage, my voice barely a whisper. "It's okay." It wasn't okay. It was far from okay. But what could I say? What could I do? She wasn't my mom anymore. She was Richard's Linda. And I was just there. A leftover piece of a life she no longer wanted. A constant irritating reminder of who she used to be. It was a Tuesday, I remember, because Tuesdays were meatloaf night. I hated meatloaf. But Mom always made it with this weird ketchup glaze that, for some reason, I actually liked. The smell was wafting through the house when she came home, her face set, her eyes hard. She wasn't carrying her usual briefcase. Instead, she had a small suitcase, the expensive leather kind Richard had bought her. My stomach clenched. I knew, even before she spoke, that something was wrong. Really wrong. "Rachel," she said, her voice strained, like she was trying to hold back tears. "We need to talk." We sat in the living room, the silence heavy and suffocating. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway suddenly seemed deafening. She kept twisting the strap of her purse, her knuckles white. I just stared at her, waiting for the inevitable, the words that would shatter what was left of our already fractured reality. "I'm moving in with Richard," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. She didn't meet my eyes, she just kept fiddling with that damn purse strap. I think I laughed. A short, sharp, disbelieving sound. "Moving in?" I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "What about me?" God, even now, typing this, I can feel the shame creeping up my throat, like I was begging for scraps of her attention. She looked up then, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. But there was something else there, too. Something cold, something distant, something that made my blood run cold. "You're 18, Rachel," she said, her voice firm, almost clipped. "You're old enough to figure it out." That's it. That's all she said. You're old enough to figure it out. Like I was some kind of math problem she couldn't be bothered to solve. Like I was an inconvenience, a burden she was finally free to shed. The meatloaf smell suddenly turned my stomach. The cheesy wind chimes outside seemed to mock me with their cheerful tinkling. Everything felt wrong, twisted, distorted. She stood up then, picked up her suitcase, and walked towards the door. I just sat there, numb, watching her go, like I was watching a movie, a bad dream unfold. Before my eyes. I didn't try to stop her. I didn't say a word. I just watched as she walked out of my life, the scent of vanilla and something flowery lingering in the air like a cruel reminder of everything we'd lost. The front door clicked shut, the sound echoing through the empty house. And then, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence that pressed down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the closed door, the faint smell of her perfume clinging to the air, a ghost of a memory. And then, finally, the tears came. Hot, angry tears that streamed down my face, blurring my vision, leaving salty trails on my skin. The silence after she left was deafening. Like the world had suddenly gone mute, leaving me stranded in this hollow, echoing space. I remember feeling hollowed out. Like someone had scooped out my insides and left me empty. The tears came then, a torrent of hot, angry tears that I couldn't stop. I curled up on the floor, my arms wrapped around my knees, my body shaking with sobs. The floral sofa, once a symbol of comfort and familiarity, now felt cold and alien. The house, our house, felt like a stranger's house. Everything was wrong, everything was broken. I don't know how long I stayed there, crumpled on the floor, the remnants of Mom's perfume mocking me with their sweetness. Hours, maybe. The sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, but I didn't notice. The world outside didn't matter. Nothing mattered. All I could feel was this gaping hole in my chest, this raw, aching emptiness where my mother used to be. Then the anger came. A hot, burning rage that coursed through my veins, replacing the numbness with a fierce, almost primal energy. I hated her. I hated Richard. I hated the world. I hated myself for being so pathetic, for needing her, for wanting her back, for still loving her, even after she'd discarded me like a broken toy. I remember standing up, wiping my tears with the back of my hand, a sudden surge of defiance coursing through me. "Fine," I muttered, my voice hoarse. "Fine, let her go. I don't need her. I'll show her. I'll show her I can figure it out." I went to my room, the room we'd shared so many secrets in, the room that still held the faint scent of her vanilla perfume, and started packing. Not my things. Hers. I gathered all her clothes, her shoes, her jewelry, her pictures, everything that reminded me of her, and shoved them into garbage bags. I dragged the bags down the stairs, my arms aching, my heart pounding in my chest. I dumped them on the front porch, next to the overflowing recycling bin and the dusty welcome mat. I didn't care if it rained, if the raccoons got into them, if they were ruined. I just wanted them gone. I wanted every trace of her erased from my life. I went back inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, my body trembling with exhaustion and a strange, hollow sense of triumph. I'd done it. I'd cut her out. I'd severed the tie. I was free. But even then, as I stood there in the silence of the empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of our past, I knew, deep down, that I wasn't free. Not really. I was just alone, and that, I realized, was a far heavier burden to bear. The silence was the worst. This thick, suffocating blanket of quiet that pressed down on me, day after day, night after night. The creaking of the house, the rustling of the wind in the oak tree, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway, sounds I'd barely noticed before, now echoed through the empty rooms, amplifying the loneliness. It was like the house was holding its breath, waiting for her to come back, waiting for the laughter, the music, the scent of vanilla, and something flowery to fill the void. "Figure it out!" God, those words haunted me. They echoed in my head, a constant mocking refrain. And so I did. I figured it out. I learned how to pay bills, how to fix a leaky faucet, how to make something other than ramen noodles for dinner. I figured out how to navigate the complexities of adult life without a safety net, without a guide, without the one person who was supposed to be there to catch me when I fell. I got 2 jobs, one at a greasy diner and another at a bookstore. The diner was hell. Endless streams of demanding customers, sticky tables, and the constant smell of burnt coffee. The bookstore was better, surrounded by books, by stories of other Opal's lives. I could almost forget my own for a little while. But even there, in the quiet aisles, the loneliness would creep in, a cold, unwelcome guest. The money was never enough. Rent was always late. Utilities were constantly threatened with disconnection. I ate a lot of ramen and peanut butter. Anything cheap and filling. I wore hand-me-downs and shoes with holes in the soles. I learned to make $1 stretch like a rubber band, to prioritize survival over everything else. There was no room for extras, for luxuries, for the things that made life enjoyable. The first few months were a blur of exhaustion and anxiety. I was constantly tired, constantly stressed, constantly on the verge of tears. I'd come home from work, collapse on the couch, and stare at the ceiling, the silence pressing down on me, the emptiness echoing in my chest. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, not with 2 jobs and a mountain of responsibilities. I'd lie awake at night, listening to the creaking of the house, the rustling of the leaves outside my window, the ticking of the clock in the hallway, each sound a reminder of her absence. I'd replay our last conversation in my head, over and over again, searching for a different ending, a different outcome. You're old enough to figure it out. The words would ring in my ears, a constant, painful refrain. There were moments, fleeting moments of defiance, I guess, like, "Yeah, screw you, Mom. I am figuring it out. I don't need you." But those moments were always followed by a crushing wave of sadness, a deep, aching loneliness that threatened to swallow me whole. She called a few times. Once, a month after she left, I didn't answer. Another time, a few months later, I let it go to voicemail. Her voice was hesitant, almost apologetic. She asked how I was doing, if I needed anything. I deleted the message without listening to the whole thing. The sound of her voice, even through the distorted speaker of my phone, was too much. It ripped open the wound, the raw, gaping hole in my chest that I was desperately trying to close. Then, there was the email. A long, rambling message filled with excuses and justifications. She talked about how happy she was with Richard, how he'd given her the life she'd always dreamed of. She said she knew I was angry, but she hoped I'd understand. She said she loved me. I stared at the words on the screen, my heart pounding in my chest, my hands shaking. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to forgive her. But the words felt hollow, empty. They didn't reach the place inside me where the hurt lived, the place where the anger simmered, the place where the loneliness gnawed at my soul. I closed the email, deleted it, and blocked her address. I didn't want to hear from her. I didn't want to know anything about her new, perfect life. I just wanted her to disappear. The holidays were the worst, Christmas especially. I spent that first Christmas alone, in the empty house, surrounded by the ghosts of Christmases past. The silence was deafening. The tree remained undecorated, the lights still packed away in their dusty boxes. The stockings hung limp and empty on the mantelpiece. The smell of pine needles and cinnamon, once a comforting presence, was now a painful reminder of everything I'd lost. I ate a can of cold ravioli for dinner, watching reruns of old sitcoms on TV, trying to drown out the silence, the loneliness, the memories. Birthdays weren't much better. 18 candles on a store-bought cake, eaten alone in the flickering light of the kitchen, the silence broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. 1920, each year, a marker of time passing, of a life lived in the shadow of her absence. Years passed. The raw, searing pain dulled, replaced by a persistent ache, a constant, low-level hum of sadness that vibrated beneath the surface of my life. I learned to live with it, to function despite it. I made friends, built a life, a career, but the emptiness remained, a hollow space in my heart that nothing seemed to fill. And sometimes, late at night, when the house was quiet and the memories crept in, I would wonder, what if? What if I'd answered her calls? What if I'd read her email? What if I'd forgiven her, What if I hadn't been so quick to cut her out of my life? What if I'd given her a second chance? It's been 5 years. 5 years since she walked out that door. 5 years since the scent of her perfume faded from the hallway. 5 years since the sound of her laughter stopped echoing in the living room. 5 years of silence. 5 years of nothing. I've built a life for myself, a good life, even. I have a decent job, a small apartment downtown, friends who actually care about me. I even have a cat, a fluffy ginger tabby named Pumpkin. He's a terrible hunter, but he's a great cuddler, and sometimes, when he's purring contentedly on my lap, I almost feel whole. But the scars are still there, hidden beneath the surface, a network of fine cracks in the foundation of my being, and sometimes, when I least expect it, they ache. A sudden memory, a familiar scent, a song on the radio. Anything can trigger it. This wave of sadness that washes over me, leaving me breathless and disoriented. The anger has faded, mostly. It's been replaced by this weariness, this bone-deep exhaustion that has nothing to do with lack of sleep. It's the weariness of carrying this burden, this weight of resentment and hurt for so long. Sometimes, late at night, when the city is quiet and Pumpkin is curled up asleep at the foot of my bed, I find myself thinking about her. Wondering where she is, what she's doing, if she ever thinks about me. Wondering if she regrets what she did, if she ever misses the life we had, the life we lost. I try not to think about it, to push the thoughts away, to bury them deep down where they can't hurt me. But they always come back. These unwelcome guests, intruding on my peace, reminding me of the gaping hole in my life, the emptiness that she left behind. I tell myself I'm better off without her, that she made her choice, that she abandoned me, that I'm stronger now, more independent, more resilient. And I believe it, most of the time. But then there are these moments, these fleeting moments of doubt, these whispers in the back of my mind that ask, what if? What if I'd handled it differently? What if I hadn't been so quick to anger, so quick to cut her off? What if I'd tried to understand, to forgive? What if I'd given her a second chance? I know, logically, that it's not my fault. That she's the one who walked away. That she's the one who broke our family. That she's the one who left me to figure it out on my own. But still, the doubt lingers. A persistent, nagging voice in the back of my head. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe I was too harsh. Maybe, just maybe, things could have been different. The thought makes me uncomfortable, makes me squirm. Because if I admit that, if I acknowledge even the slightest possibility that I might have played a part in this mess, then I have to confront the possibility that maybe I'm not the victim here. Maybe I'm not entirely blameless. And that's a terrifying thought, because if I'm not the victim, then who am I? It was raining last night. That kind of cold, relentless Denver rain that seeps into your bones and chills you to the core. I was curled up on the couch, Pumpkin purring on my lap, a mug of lukewarm tea growing cold in my hand. Reruns of some stupid sitcom flickering on the TV, the canned laughter echoing in the quiet apartment. Just another Tuesday night. Then the doorbell rang. It startled me, this unexpected intrusion into the quiet rhythm of my evening. I hesitated, my hand hovering over Pumpkin's warm fur. It was late. Who would be ringing my doorbell at this hour? A surge of anxiety tightened my chest. I'm not usually nervous, but living alone, you learn to be cautious. I peered through the peephole, my heart pounding in my chest. And there she was. Linda, my mother. Standing on my doorstep, drenched to the bone, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes red and swollen. She looked smaller than I remembered, frailer, older. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a threadbare coat and worn shoes. The polished, sophisticated woman who'd walked out of my life 5 years ago was gone, replaced by this broken, vulnerable creature. I froze, my hand still on the doorknob, my mind racing. What was she doing here, after all this time, after everything she'd done? A wave of anger, hot and sharp, washed over me. I wanted to slam the door in her face, to tell her to get lost, to disappear from my life again. I wanted to scream, to yell, to unleash all the pent-up rage and resentment that I'd been carrying for so long. But I didn't. I just stood there, staring at her through the peephole, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath catching in my throat. She raised a trembling hand and knocked again, the sound sharp and insistent in the quiet hallway. This time, I saw the tears streaming down her face, the way her shoulders slumped with exhaustion and despair. And something inside me shifted. The anger didn't disappear, not completely, but it was muted, softened, overshadowed by something else, something I couldn't quite name. Pity, maybe? Or maybe just shock, disbelief. I took a deep breath, my hand trembling, and unlocked the door. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise, a flicker of hope igniting in their depths. "Rachel?" she whispered, her voice hoarse, barely audible above the sound of the rain. "Oh, Rachel!" And then she started to cry. Not the quiet, controlled tears she'd shed when she'd told me she was leaving. These were raw, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. She reached out a trembling hand, as if to touch me, then hesitated, her hand hovering in the air between us. I didn't move. I just stood there, watching her, my mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Anger, resentment, confusion, pity, all swirling together in a chaotic mess. He took everything? She sobbed, her voice choked with tears. "Richard, he left. He took all the money, the house, everything. I have nowhere to go." She looked at me then, her eyes pleading, desperate. "Please, Rachel," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. Can I stay here? Just for tonight, please?" And that's where I am now, standing in my doorway, staring at my mother, the woman who abandoned me 5 years ago, the woman who told me I was old enough to figure it out, the woman who broke my heart and shattered my world. Standing here, listening to her cry, watching her crumble before my eyes, and feeling I don't know what. Part of me wants to slam the door in her face, wants to tell her to go to hell, wants to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she inflicted on me, wants to watch her suffer, to see her experience the same loneliness, the same despair, the same crushing weight of abandonment that I've been carrying for so long. It would be justified, wouldn't it? She made her bed, now she can lie in it. She made her choices, now she has to face the consequences. But then there's this other part of me, this small, quiet voice in the back of my head that whispers, what if? What if I let her in? What if I give her a second chance? What if, just maybe, things can be different this time? I don't know what to do. I'm so confused, so angry, so tired. AITA for not letting her in? Part of me feels justified, like she's finally facing the consequences of her actions. But another part of me can't help but feel something. I don't know what. Am I a monster for even hesitating?